Yeah, okay, so 3, 2, 1, are we close enough? I think we are wherever we are. We're going to
there we go.
Nasty like that. So we can hear your like soft. Soothing voice. And that's like, the feedback is how different we are in some respects. And it's like, it's like the, different sides of the room. Like mine's like the clearly like the popular side where like people want to come and have a good time and that kind of thing, and if they want to do some soul searching,
that's my side. Sounds about right.
Yeah, because it's like I'm loud and verbose, on that sense, and perhaps a little bit more eloquent. I'm willing to concede. I will give it. I'll give credit where it's due, and that's kind of like the lead into extroversion. So on the Big 5 personality traits, like my highest trait is actually extroversion.
Really?
Yeah, no, it's very high, and I
wouldn't have been able to tell that at all.
No, let me convince you of this fact. We're friends. Hey, I like friends. The more friends, the merrier.
Yeah.
And like I'm getting a little bit self-conscious here because I'm like thinking like, yes, because it's like extroverts like to perform. Part of me was like, looking back, I was like, I regret not doing drama. But then back at the time, it was like, it's we're supposed to play sports, which I obviously did as well. So very involved in social events, and motivated by social rewards, I'd say. So that would be a definite thing. So I don't even need to ask you, but I know that I'm high on extroversion.
Yes. Mine's not as high. I sit in the middle, but
okay.
I do lean towards extroversion because I still get energy from engaging with people, and I like the sound of my own voice. So it's like I enjoy a conversation. I get I have a lot of energy that comes from engaging with people. So I definitely lean on the extroversion side.
Like what you guys don't see is like how much we talk before,
yes.
And it's got nothing to do. It's actually got zero to do with whatever the topic is. We cover everything that we could possibly come up with,
Yeah.
And I still feel like we'd have enough gas in the tank to kind of
go on. You see, there's a good sign if you're an extrovert or not. It's like whether people engagement gives energy, or whether it takes energy away.
Yeah, and there's that whole thing. I'm like, it's a kind of standing joke with like extroverts will find an introvert and adopt them.
Someone who will listen to me talk and not interrupt me. That would be so
nice. Like they have to. They're just like, oh, kill me now. This is never going to end. This exhausts me. Please, I only have so much energy in my life for this kind of thing.
My husband always says, why do you have to ask all these questions? Can't you just ask one? It's like, and then what about this? What about this?
And it's like, heaven help you if you're not paying attention.
Yes, yeah.
I'll know.
But actually, it brings to mind a really funny story is that he would come home from work and I'd be like immediately like, how was your day? How was that meeting? What went on? Like right in your face straight away. And he was like a deer in the headlights. It's like, could I go get changed first before strangers change? Yes. Yeah, and that was a big dynamic for us to figure out is that him being an introvert, I needed to respect his space to recover from the demands of the day and then not to be so in his face because I was quite overwhelming and to tone it down a little bit, which has helped.
Yeah,
I'm not so scary now when he gets home.
It takes a lot it took a lot for me to kind of sort of develop nuances, when to step up and when not to step up, you know what I mean? Like when to stand up and perform and when to take a step back. But it's also the thing on like listening.
Extroverts need to count to 10 before they respond. It's like learn how to count to 10 while you're focusing on listening and trying not to prepare what you're going to say next over processing what you're hearing.
When I was younger, like it was like, you're not listening, you're not listening to me. And I'm like, no, why don't you tell me that I'm not listening? They're like, I've heard what you've had to say. And like, and looking back, I'm like,
Yeah.
like it's a bit cringy,
Yeah.
you know. It's a little bit cringy, you know. And there is there is a tendency to also to dominate in that sense, to dominate social engagement.
Yeah. And overwhelm.
And overwhelm, that would be, I would say that would be like the negative expression of that, yeah, and it's, I mean, we are social creatures, and it's, I mean, I would say some of the favorable elements is having an amazing support structure. Just the sheer amount of people that I know, and the amount of time and energy that I invest into relationships. And I have to say that from my side, in any case, that's paid itself over and over and over in my lifetime, And I think there was also one stage in my life where I was, where I was really just like focused on work and just everything and just making progress in terms of what I was doing. And I was, and I kind of like sacrificed the time that I would have spent on friends and anything in that kind of domain. And then when that kind of unraveled, I was like, oh, it's like the whole thing I wasn't on Facebook. I was completely cut off, and I was like, oh, I am so alone without any support. I do not ever want to be in this position ever again. Ever again. We were talking about the shift in the Enneagram and stuff like it, and that's actually when it happened. That's when it happened. And it was always something that I tried to sort of suppress and to keep down and to keep low, because it's like, to be the person like in a social engagement where afterwards it's like when you leave, like people are relieved. Like, I don't want that. Like it was a horrific thing.
That's also a good example of how extreme your extroversion is, because the more extreme an extroversion score, the more noticeable that energy is in a room. And so when it is extreme, there is a presence that you bring to a room, which can be a positive, because there's a lot of energy that comes with it. There's a lot of action, there's a lot of movement, but then it can overwhelm people who aren't as extreme on the extroversion score.
I mean, some people can just feel like they're absolutely bombarded. You know what I mean? Let me tell you, have you met Joel? This is my new best friend. This is my new best friend, Joel, and we're going to be spending a lot of time. You know what I mean? They just like I don't know, like it's just been taken hostage, basically. On that front. And but it's
But there are loads of advantages of being an extrovert, as we will cover the advantages of being an introvert. But so what have been some of the benefits for you besides being able to build a network and have a vast amount of connections? What other things?
I have zero social anxiety. Not zero. No, zero is not true. But I have little social anxiety. So the explorative component to it has been very enjoyable for me. The whole thing on venturing out and exploring new things and meeting new people and that kind of thing. I love it. I love that. And so it's all the experiences that I get through the pursuit of those kind of things, and meeting new people and I like people, I like people and I like to be around people, and that sort of speaks very well to like my line of work, our line of work, is I like people and I want them to do well, and it's and there's an energy that kind of manifests, and so it's almost to the extent where if there's abundance, I can share it with others. And that's a very nice experience for me, and presenting, like I am the happiest little human being. Like if there's like a big class of like 300 to 500 people and I'm just on point. It's my happiest place ever.
Oh, really?
And then it's also like the attention that other people give me, like that I treat their attention as valuable. Like that's not a trivial thing, you know what I mean? If somebody is actually spending their time to focus in on what it is that I'm saying and doing whatever it is that I'm doing better be bloody well worth it, you know. So it's something that I appreciate, that I don't
Take for granted.
Don't take it for I don't take it for granted, and I don't dismiss it. And it is something that I absolutely enjoy doing, you know, which is why, like, you know, I would have loved to have done drama. Like, if I could go back, you know, I'd be like, okay, yes, like, yeah, I know, okay, like, some people might find it, but listen, this is going to pay off. I can't even tell you how much this is going to pay off, like later down the line. So there was always this want to perform, but then you kind of, you know, had to learn the skills on how to do that, you know, which is a whole other thing, you know. How do you command and how do you guide like a massive group of people's attention and focus to something that is good, you know.
And how do you turn it on and turn it off when needed? Because I think when you're not as self-aware, it's always on. Whereas if you're a little bit more aware, you realize, okay, the situation doesn't need this as much.
Yeah, well, that speaks to integration, you know, and isn't that the holy grail of human functioning? You know? Is when to be like that and when not to be like that, you know.
And there's one good and one bad again. It's like, you know, when you think introverts will often be made to feel like they are less than, because extroverts are so out there and in your face, and then if I'm not like that, well, it means I must not have what is needed. So often introverts will feel like there is something missing. And so tell me what you feel are the valued, of the ideals or the positives of being an introvert.
Well, it's what I think is a very good thing is they have the tendency to have much deeper relationships with fewer people, you know, as opposed to having many, let's say, 30% depth of relationship, but have many of those sort of things, you know. So I think they. The friends that they make, I mean, and that they know, I mean, they really know, and they know them deep, and they share of themselves. So there's a depth of bond, you know.
There's an intention behind it.
Yes, you know, and I think that's quite a good thing, you know. I mean, it's a different almost risk reward strategy, you know, to survival, you know, because I mean, all of our traits, you know, talk to. There's an evolutionary aspect to that, and everything is dialed in so that we survive, you know. So, you know, so that's the strategy, you know. So fewer people, but a higher investment in fewer people, you know. To something like you could equate that to, let's say, you know, like families used to have six, 7 kids, you know. And it's like, well, how much can you invest in whatever it is divided by 6? You know, I mean, that's quite tricky. You know, where you rise up a little bit, and in modern day times, you know, we have far fewer children, but a higher investment in that. You know, so yeah. There's. I also think the introverts that I know, like the conversations that I have, look, and also know obviously how to have this conversation. You know, by now for sure, and it's like. You know, I will, because they'll mull over things. You know,
they often think before they talk, whereas we talk to think.
Yeah.
and you'll see both of us are extroverted because the podcast is the more I talk, the more I'll find things to talk about.
Yeah.
Whereas having a podcast with an introvert, they might have a script and a very set way of what will be discussed, how it will be discussed, how it will come out. And if it goes off script, it's discomfort. There's discomfort if it goes off script. Yeah. Yeah. Whereas we like, well, once switch it on, let's see what goes.
Well, we live in off script.
Yes. But it is more comfortable because we sit on the extroversion.
Like this, like in case you haven't noticed, this is definitely off the cuff all the time.
Yeah. No editing?
No, there's definitely no editing. We don't come in here with like a preconceived notion. No. You know? So, you know, the steak we make on the day is
but also that can be the frustration for being around an extrovert too, is because I think as I talk, it sometimes takes me a while to get to my point, and sometimes I will jump around a lot of different topics as my brain starts to process certain things. And if you're an introvert, it drives you nuts. It's like, think about what you want to say and then say it succinctly, and that's a hard thing for me to do, because as I talk, I'm like, oh, what about this? And what about this? What about that?
So, like, I have an idea. Okay, so like, I'll come up with something, and then it's like, and then I'm trying to test it against myself, and I'm like, oh, this is like, I just need somebody.
Just to bounce it off.
That's it. I don't even need you to
Say anything.
You don't even need to understand what it is that I'm saying. Right?
Exactly.
I'll answer for you.
Yeah. But then that's why extroverts love brainstorming. There's a big energy that comes with bouncing that off someone else, and I think there's a magic that happens as it comes out your mouth. That's when you process it. Whereas introverts are skilled at sitting and thinking about
I imagine
things.
that they feel like that they're being assaulted.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like they're just like under assault, and under just like, yes, just whoa, like there's boundaries here, and I feel like you're crossing this boundary. You know?
But also then, so we will have 1,000 ideas come out our mouth. 90% of them are not great.
Shit.
Whereas an introvert, the one thing that will come out their mouth will have been well thought through. So that will be gold.
Yeah, it's not about the thing on generating options. It's about like, generating options or solutions is one thing, but only actually verbalize the one that you actually think has a chance of working. Yeah,
so one thing with an introvert is like to get them to the point of verbalizing the idea, that process might take longer than what it would take an extrovert. So sometimes they don't speak up as often as they should, and they miss opportunities because of I'm busy formulating my thoughts, and then an extrovert will have jumped in and taken that slot.
But there is this kind of competitive aspect to extroverts. It's where it's like you could have an amazing idea and whatever else, but you'd just be drowned. By and then it kind of becomes. And then it's also kind of incumbent on whoever is actually leading the group to actually whatever do the turn taking thing and that sort of thing, because you ideally would like input from everybody. Yeah.
But I think that's also, it's to identify, when I work with the scale of introversion and extroversion, extroverts need to understand how they can jump in first too quickly. Introverts need to understand how they must encourage themselves to jump in quicker. So that they don't miss out.
Yeah, there's like this positive impulsive element almost to extroversion, which is true. It's also like in our neural circuits, like our positive emotion resides in our extroverted circuit. It's that exploratory, making progress towards a goal, which is one of the few times that we actually experience positive mood. And then there is like the weird combination that it's also like extroversion, how strongly it is bound together with the concept of self-esteem. So it's like high extroversion, low neuroticism literally maps one-on-one onto self-esteem scales, which is why I don't really like them so much, like on that front. So it's also like, high extroverts are sort of perceived.
Yeah, because I think it's a perception, not necessarily what might be happening internally.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of extroverts can create an impression.
Yeah, because it's not necessarily loud people that when people
loud equals confident. It doesn't necessarily mean that.
I know, but you're right. It doesn't. So when people are looking. It's like, geez, the quiet person in the corner that's kind of keeping to themselves and stuff like that. That's normally like, geez, something's wrong. I need to kind of investigate further. Extroverts can just like talk and distract and actually just never even go into anything. Without saying anything.
I always joke because my husband could easily drive from here to Durban and not say anything in silence and be completely satisfied.
My one brother-in-law can do that.
Yeah, and there's no problem. He doesn't see it as an issue. Yeah. And I'm like, I was like, we're going to travel so far. We might as well have all these conversations that we haven't had time for. He's like, oh dear, this is not gonna work.
We can catch up. We can catch up all of it.
Let's talk. He's like, oh no, I'd actually not like to.
Yeah, there's just again with my brother-in-law Ryan, and he's like, I like him, I love him a lot. He's an amazing guy. So it's like, so my sister will fall asleep in the car, but they're actually listening to like an audio book, and he's happy. He's just doing, and he's that guy, Give him give him a fishing rod and whatever else, like his little fishing, and he'll go there off there into the rocks. You know, he'll make friends with whoever the other fishermen are, but he'll do his thing, and he's happy, so happy just doing that. And he can do that on his own, no problem. You know, my sister's chatty. she's super chatty, but so like the story is like, you know, so they're driving somewhere, she'll fall asleep, they're listening to this audiobook, you know, and then she kind of wakes up and she's like, no, I've missed this now.
Rewind.
Yeah, rewind, and then we go to listen to it all over again. It's like 4 hours. Yeah, this is a slight story on that one. Okay, so there is an almost ascendant aspect to extroversion. You also like presenting.
Yeah.
You know? And there's nothing quite like the feeling like knowing that you've nailed it.
Yeah.
That's absolutely my top 3 best feeling.
Yeah. When they stand up to applause.
Yeah. And
yeah,
all hail, you know,
but also
a bit of
that
comes.
attention is not uncomfortable for me to take as an extrovert, whereas an introvert, that attention is there's discomfort around it. It's not as it doesn't feel as rewarding.
Oh, shame, man. That's one of the most amazing things. But I get that. It's completely different.
But it's also, again, maybe just to do a little bit around an extrovert is sometimes not as shy and not as uncomfortable being in the limelight and not as uncomfortable being put on the spot. Whereas an introvert, as soon as the limelight turns to them, there's a bit of discomfort. And so it's just, you know, it's again just the nuances of introversion and extroversion.
I mean, what is one of those theories, like, you know, like extroverts are quite, let's say, dampened neurologically, you know, and need to seek external stimulus to kind of amp that up, you know, where it's introverts already like at the end, they don't actually
too much is too much. Yeah.
Because then it becomes a thing like being overstimulated on that sense, where extroverts seek stimulation. So like, and that kind of that model fits for me. You know, that kind of works. It works like that. You know, and then it's but you know, like I think, I mean, it is one of those things that's almost subtly encouraged by broader society, you know, to be more extroverted, you know, to be out there, you know, like, you know, having a shy child, or you know what I mean, because it's like, I mean, it's an absolute shit show if you've got kids and they don't have friends, you know, or that they haven't made any friends. I mean, that's like,
and also, or if they slow to warm up to those scenarios.
Yeah.
You know, I think introversion and extroversion is one of the characteristics that you can notice in children quite easily.
Yes.
So it's something you can pick up from a really small age. My son would happily run into a group of kids and just like make friends. Want to play? And in our house it's quite funny because we have to have scheduled quiet times where no one is allowed to talk because my son talks. My son talks so much, and he loves the noise, he loves the excitement. So you can immediately see that. So immediately see that, like you said about that theory, is that he's comfortable with a lot of stimulation, a lot of energy coming in. And whereas I have a friend who has an introverted child, and that child is the one that holds onto her skirt and just susses the situation out first, warms up to the playground, might play alone on the sand on their own, and be okay with that. It's not a problem. But you can see an immediate difference in the dynamic. And that child is overwhelmed by loud noises, so if other kids come and it's too loud, they don't want to be there anymore, and it gets too much too quickly, easily for that child, whereas my child is like, lay it on, put the music loud, have kids screaming, you know.
Listen, positive affect is part of extroversion, You know what I mean? So it's like, you know, we don't go seeking out things because we don't like it. What's the other combat? Excitement seeking. Okay, well that means risk. That means risky behaviors. You know, like, so those behaviors that are perhaps not so conducive to longevity.
But an extrovert is more likely to put their foot in their mouth, like say something that they regret, and have wished that they'd said something.
I've done that
more than once. But an introvert is less likely to do that.
Yeah.
They very rarely would say something that they regret.
Yeah.
And
There's
as an
definite
extrovert,
positives here. Make no mistake.
also overshare. I will overshare something too personal that makes someone else feel uncomfortable, and an introvert won't do that.
They're probably like, she's so brave.
It's like, well, she's so vulnerable. It's like, nope.
But how's it like, you can just open up like that, like, I wish I was like that. It's like, it's like also overshare, and it's like, not only overshare, but like it's like inadvertently burden somebody else with something like
yes.
that they weren't planning for,
Yeah.
Oversharers.
Oversharers.
The urge to purge,
Just find another human being that you could listen to you for long enough to.
Yeah, what I'm going to just to pass the time, like, I'll make friends with everybody, like, all the staff here, like, I know.
Yeah.
Like, I know, and I joke with them.
Oh, that's what's funny when you drive in. It's like, I'm here to see Klaus. Okay, cool. It's like, we know who you are. But that's it. As an extrovert, there's more visibility often. And so sometimes introverts get overlooked because they might fly under the radar, and they might not because they don't add value, it's just because people haven't noticed them because you're not as in their face.
It has nothing to do with competence.
No,
that's
not
for
at
sure.
all. And it's just about branding, really. Because extroverts tend to be like, it doesn't mean what we're offering is better, it just means that we're more open to
all that there's any substance behind it.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just, all it is just
exactly.
all it is like the advertising.
The noise, it's the sound machine.
It's the sound machine, it's like the advertising thing.
Yeah. But also sometimes in our world, the one who makes the biggest noise gets the contract, So it's like, that's the risk with introverted people, is that they need to find a strategy that works for them so that they get their voice heard. So they don't necessarily have to behave like an extrovert, because that's the misconception. I must be like that in order to, but they can't. They need to find a way to.
Like an unwritten deal that I have with my introverted friends is like, because they like to message, and they like to message a lot. I don't like to message. I'll pick up. Fine if it's a small thing, fine, Otherwise, if we're going to have a conversation, we're going to do it properly,
Yeah,
and then
introverts don't like phones.
No, it's like and I know this, and fair enough, So like, it's like, okay, so we are going to have this conversation, but we're going to have it like once every 2-3 weeks. Okay, so okay, kind of like, and that seems to be okay.
But there's a plan to it, and there's a schedule to it.
Yes.
Whereas an unplanned conversation for an introvert is uncomfortable. It's like, well, I didn't expect you were going to call, and I'm not ready. Whereas if you say, I'm going to phone you every Tuesday at 5, it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I've had that conversation, and it's just like this kind of thing. I'm like I'm catching them off guard. You know what I mean? It's like, why are you trying to catch me off guard? And I'm like, I'm definitely not trying to catch you off guard. I didn't even know this was that conversation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just want to tell you about something, and and how's it going, and kind of what's happening. And I've also learned listening skills, so you can talk to me also if you want.
But I know with my extroverted friends, they will phone. Like, I just thought of you. I thought I'd give you a call.
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah. Because introverts don't necessarily do that, and it's like very strategic and it's planned. Yeah, it is funny.
Yeah, so there does seem to be like, let's say, like a slightly more methodical component to it. It's also one of those things where it's like like the quiet time, sit there with a book to read, and that kind of. Obviously, it's not that extroverts don't read books. I mean, it's definitely not.
And it's not like I don't like quiet time. But an extended period of quiet time will lead to a desire for me to see someone to chat to or connect with. I don't think I could be on an island on my own and be satisfied long term.
Oh, no. I'd make friends with the local wildlife.
Yeah.
I would.
You would have your soccer ball.
Wilson.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Even when we're talking about this, because this is how the extroversion goes, is like, the notion of, let's say, like, if you now did the thing with puppets, the little thing of ours, and then we could have this whole conversation, and I know that if I had that we could do that straight away like that, and it's bizarre and a bit dumb, but who knows where that would end. It's a super extroverted thing to do.
But also we need, like, I always love the combination and how we need each other. Like there isn't one better, one worse. That I need introverts around me to remind me that it's okay to breathe and reflect before I open my mouth. And introverts need me around to realize that sometimes you can take action in the world quickly and the world won't end. Or I can move faster than I'm comfortable. Or I can, there's something that we need from each other that we learn.
Yeah, it's almost like like there's this container, or like extroverts don't have a container, and maybe they could use some container, in that they've got their sort of container where it's like, as long as I stay within the scope of this thing, then everything's well, nothing's going to unsettle me, and that might be true. But the consequence of that is there's nothing new. You know what I mean? There's nothing if you venture forth to kind of sort of bring in on this, and it's not that you can't create ideas or jump on the internet or that sort of thing, but there is like this exposure to different environments, and there's that, the idea of epigenetics, and that that we've got genes that switch on and off depending on the environments we put ourselves in. As an extrovert, I put myself in a lot of environments, and then it's like, there's new parts of me that would light up as a consequence, and I discover new parts of myself too. We can argue on whether that is, but I would say that is a good thing.
But then an extrovert might not as easily sit on their own and reflect on deeper personal things.
Personal reflection.
Yeah,
yes,
personal reflection is probably not the first choice. And I'm not saying I wouldn't do it, but it's like I'd rather sit with someone and have a conversation or have a coaching conversation. I think I find as an extrovert more value in having the conversation than what I do, journaling. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know how you feel about journaling. I kind of feel like, well, what I could write in the same amount of time, I could have said 10,000 more words.
I suppose it would depend on like how personal it is. But I've done a lot of journaling, over the years, definitely. A lot of written work, like trying to make sense of things, that I'm unable to comprehend on my own, where somebody isn't like available, or it's not something that I would like to share with you. It's like something it's like my own personal secret, and that's like, well, that's between me, myself, and I. But like, I still need to be able to work through it. And writing helps extensively to that. I think, like in a cliche term, I would imagine, rightly or wrongly, that so somebody that's introverted, like they prefer to send messages, and the written communication is something that they rely on. Yeah. We rely on like our tools are words, and we use that, those are our things. And I would imagine that there might be like because of their interest in that they actually might be better writers, let's say. Or broadly speaking, you know what I mean? I
think you might just see it practically in that an extrovert might have a shorter email and might have picked up a phone before, whereas an introvert would have spent time thinking, changing, adjusting, and the email would be more carefully considered, might be longer.
What is my tone?
They would have been more intentional about it, whereas we would be like, okay, let's just phone. That the patience there in terms of writing out a long email might not necessarily be there. Yeah. So sometimes you can pick it up in those sorts of things, and you can also pick it up, where people like to sit in an office. An extrovert could handle sitting at the corner of an office where the door keeps getting opened all day, whereas an introvert, that would be distracting. They would need to sit closer to a wall where there wouldn't be as much movement. Yeah. So there's lots of little ways that you can start to tell, how overstimulated are you. And
look at the whole movement towards like, these kind of open spaces and that kind of thing. I mean, like, yes, like I'm an extrovert, and that gets to me sometimes as well. And I would imagine that, that's like, this is how we're doing things. Like, okay, so, if we go down to COVID, like, I don't know, I remember having these conversations with introverts, and they were like thrilled.
No, they were thrilled. They were like, suddenly the universe has designed my work environment to my ideal, in my bedroom, on my own, with no other people. They're like, please don't COVID go away. They're like, can't go. I have a friend who's an introvert, and she's like, I'm trying to think of ways to make sure that I never go back to the office. It's like, and that's the extent of the introversion, is that she's much more comfortable at home where she's connecting. She's still connecting on Zoom. She's not completely isolated, but the interpersonal dynamic is not there. The awkward coffees at the tea station are not there. All those interpersonal dynamics that made introverts feel uncomfortable are like gone.
Whatever, like the lady who's selling Tupperware or whatever, I was like, he's going to bully me into buying the thing and stuff. You know, I don't have to deal with it. I've been trying to avoid it.
Because introverts don't like small talk either. You know, whereas we could happily talk crap about lots of different things and just be like, well, look, we want a meaningful conversation too. But there's an introvert, that sort of dynamic, like, oh, now I have to deal with Sally or Joe or Peter, or like all these different people that have different dynamics and different, it's like, that takes effort. It's going to take my energy. I'm going to run out of energy. It's like, it's going to drain me. It's much easier if we just do what needs to be done.
No, like if I can just like ninja bomb it.
Yes.
You know what I mean? If I can just kind of sneak on a little kind of like that would be brilliant.
Yeah.
So like it was, and then like during the lockdown, it was like extroverts were like, what the hell are we
suffering big time.
Yeah.
And for me, struggling with the connection lost. So and the biggest part for me, and I think it's got to do with more factors than just my extroversion, is the sense, the physical sense that I get from being with another person. So like, I get a lot of tactile experience with someone, like how did their micro expressions, the energy that I felt in the room, my senses, I get satisfaction from that type of interaction.
Well, it's called a vibe, like you and I, we get a vibe from when we're chatting and stuff like that, and there's a certain energy that there, and I can sense things, no, it was awful.
Yeah, and a big part of like what I missed from the vibe from my family, like just being with my mom or being with my dad, that type of physical connection. And lockdown was harder for extroverts.
Oh no, I ate shit. I ate a lot of it, and it was like the training, the online training, and it's like, what? I feel like I'm being punished.
Yeah.
Honestly, I felt like I was being punished, and I was getting so like people have their cameras off, because. Know that we like it's in our policy where we don't have to have it, and I'm like, I don't care if that's in your policy. Like I think this is rude. You know what I mean? Like it's.
I also get a lot of information. My whole makeup of me is watching how you respond to me. So like, if I can't see your face, I find that I don't have as much information that I would have had previously.
Okay, so you venture something out. Okay, am I on point? Am I off point? Do I have the interest? Do I not have the interest? Okay, the out. Okay, so the feedback to that is, okay, I need to shift. I need to change. Okay, so that isn't landing, and I need to move on to something that does. Because again, like the attention is valuable.
Yeah. And it's part of my validation. It's part of what makes me feel good enough. That might be outside of introversion and extroversion.
Oh,
but
it's like, it's like, well,
Yeah. So we have had different experiences.
Massive, we validate me. I'm 100% okay with it. Look, I'm okay. You know what I mean? It's and then it's like, part of that. I remember. So one of the things is when extroverts get depressed and when introverts get depressed. And it's extroverts tend to fare a little bit better, and it's a little bit better, and it's just because of the social the support
that they're able to generate, and also the willingness to kind of spit it out their mouth and say something so people know that they need help.
Yeah.
Whereas I think it's harder for an introvert to do that.
But it's it's the whole thing. I'm like, okay, so if something happens to you and you go off the radar, people notice. Right? The same thing, people would notice. So if I'm off the radar, I'd be like, I know that I'll get a phone call, like people checking in, like, hey man. No.
Yeah, because they're used to having your energy around, and when it's not there, it's more easily noticeable.
Yeah.
Whereas the introvert may not, it's harder to spot. I think the introverts are much better at guarding what they reveal to the world and what they choose to reveal. Whereas an extrovert, sometimes what's inside is on my face. Do you know what I mean? It's like if there's not much of a filter.
Yeah, I mean, okay, which opens up like the notion or idea of boundaries, and my sense is like, an introvert would have a much clearer sense of boundaries.
Yes, I would agree.
It's like a much thicker.
Yeah.
So it would be a much thicker thing where it's like for you and I, it's a very porous. It's a very leaky sieve kind of.
Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
you are no strangers, just people I haven't met.
Yes.
Kind of thing,
Yeah, we like that.
We'd volunteer ourselves to jump into that truck, with the sweets when we were kids.
That's what I've got to be careful with my son, because I remember we were at a shopping centre and it was Christmas time and he was running around saying Merry Christmas to everybody. And he's one of those kids like, hey, you want to come with me? He's like, sure, no problem.
So you want to see this puppy? Yes.
Yes, I was like I had to give multiple talks about just because people are friendly doesn't mean they're your friend. It's like,
that's a tough conversation.
No, but it's also like that. It didn't matter who it was; he was happy to approach. Whereas, not everybody's like that.
Yeah,
and in this day and age, it's more dangerous to be like that.
And like your kind of role as a parent for your kids is to make your kids likable, whether they're introverted or extroverted or not, because it's like you want other people to engage positively with them. You want them that they must teach them and show them things and that kind of thing, so like you want tantrums dialed out.
Yes.
Because like nobody wants to deal with that. It's just like, like this little horror child. It's like, geez, I don't want to.
Yeah, and that's the hard part, is that you don't want your child not to be friendly and open to people, because that's a good characteristic to have.
Yeah.
But then also a healthy level of skepticism would also be great.
Stranger danger.
Yes. You never understood that concept. Is like,
you and I want to, like, we'll jump in the car, like we want to get molested.
Yeah. So, but it's so interesting. It really is to watch it play out. My son said to me the other day, he got put on Instagram from his swimming school because he won a medal at his gala.
Oh, awesome.
He was like, Mom, I'm on Instagram. And it's like, it's a sense of pride.
Yeah.
And I don't know if an introvert would have that same sense of like, I'm on Instagram, than what an extrovert might feel.
Do you think that they would that an introvert is far more likely to kind of embrace the social media kind of aspect, because there's kind of separation to that thing there where it's like, I can control this like a little bit more with the boundaries and that kind of thing. I don't know, with it's like the more the merrier.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And tell me, is it like? Are your parents extroverted, or just maybe your dad?
My dad's extroverted, my mom's more... Oh, actually, you know what? It's such a nuanced thing, because when you know someone in a private capacity, it's harder to spot.
It's hard to tell.
It's hard to tell because you see them all the time.
And there's introverts who, if you didn't know it, the way that they communicate one-on-one, you'd be like, oh, this is an extrovert, because they're really sharing with me.
Yeah. And I think the only way to really tell is to know how their energy is after they've been with people. Because both my parents have the capacity to engage in an extroverted way, but the one would feel drained after a long day of that, and the other one would be energized by a long day of that. Yeah. And that's, for me, the tell between who's more of an extrovert and who's more socially skilled.
Yeah, and it's also like the whole thing on like voluntarily finding groups to be a part of.
Yeah, because an introvert can look very extroverted with a group of like-minded people talking about something they're interested in.
Yeah, where there's that common interest or something that
and with someone they're comfortable and have developed a good relationship with. But put an introvert with someone that they don't know and ask them to engage about a topic that's not interesting for them. You're not going to show, whereas an extrovert might more easily just have a conversation, chat about, like engage.
Look, it's also, like if you're going to bring this to the world of work, I mean, you get 100%, you can be an introvert and you can be a magnificent leader as well.
And
it's just
give
about
wonderful presentations.
For sure. Without a doubt, there's not this thing on like that you're an extroverted person that immediately confers sort of leadership to that. It really doesn't,
No, and it's also, for me, because it's a preference, it's separate from capability, and it's separate from your skill. It's more the flavor in which you do it and how you feel when you're doing it. So you can have an introvert who gives wonderful presentations, and you can have an extrovert who gives a terrible presentation. So it's not about the competence, but it's about an introvert preparing for a presentation will put a lot more effort in, a lot more concentration, a lot more energy, amping up to get to that point, and it will be draining for them to do it. Whereas an extrovert, you know, they might not put any preparation in, they might put some preparation in, but they get energized by the process. So at the end of the presentation, an extrovert will come off stage going, like, I feel vibed. Whereas an introvert will be like, you know, like, I think I need a break. Like, I can't do anything after the presentation. Once I've done that, I'm
There's
done.
people I can clearly remember that, you know, being introverted and also just giving excellent presentations and that sort of thing. But, you know, they spend time, you know, to deliver a quality product. And I also remember, you know, me, it's like, you know, there's either a rush or having to cut a corner and stuff like that and doing something, just like winging it. You know, and then the thing is to become good at winging it. You know,
that's the art, the real art.
Right.
But also an extrovert is okay to wing it. They'll be okay saying, I have a rough idea of what I want to speak about, and I'm going to just make it work. Whereas an introvert, that doesn't feel sufficient. It feels too open-ended. They would rather stick to a script than wing it.
Yeah. I have bombed in some presentations in my life before. We have just eaten the biggest turds you can possibly, man. We could not get any worse. And one was when I was working in Germany, when I was working for Ali as a software engineer. And for whatever reason, they were like, you're presenting this thing at the end of the 6 weeks. It was some crazy deadline to present. So anyway, I don't want to get into technicalities of it. And there was no ways, and I'm trying to tell them, like, listen, like, this thing just isn't ready. This is way more complicated. And it's just like, you're doing this. That's just kind of like that. And I was in with the senior executives, where it was like, I'm presenting this thing to this thing. And if I tell you that just the sweat and the bombing, and I was mashing English and German, and I think I threw in a bit of Afrikaans there, it was devastating. It was a horrific experience. After that, I was like, okay, that's never going to happen to me again. Okay, you know what I mean? It's like, I'm going to get good at this kind of thing, where, you know, just that situation. It was excruciating. It was really bad.
But also, that's why I say it's like your preference is separate from your capability.
Yeah.
You know, it's like your preference might aid in the enhancement of a certain capability. So my extroversion can sometimes support me in my building the skill to give presentations, but it's not going to guarantee that I'll be good at it.
Yeah, we kind of touched on this on you know, that time is, you know, like, you know, to get that audience and to kind of have that thing and to be able to get it, but it's like, man, if you don't have something on top of that, it falls flat. And there's also something else where it sometimes extroverts come across as better off sometimes than what they actually are. So you know, sometimes, you know, so there's an attribution towards, and I see this sometimes in when we do assessments. Oh, you've definitely seen this for sure.
Yeah.
You know, where it's like, you know, there's somebody just interviews and everybody just thinks this person is absolutely brilliant. Like, they're just like, there's this calm about them. They, you know, like they're not stressed, low anxiety, extroverted, so they, you know, and they know how to talk to a room, and it's like, just engenders this faith almost, you know. And then you check and it's like, oh no, we're going to check this guy. And we're like, okay, wait, let's just check out the psychometrics first. And you're just like, okay. So it's a kind of thing where they're coming off as better than what they really are.
Yeah.
You know, and that's and then, well, that would be the kind of person that you hire, and then it's like, they're not performing as what was expected, you know, and then that becomes tricky.
Yes.
And then we get called in, and then we kind of have to fix the situation.
In the same respect, you'll have an introvert who who might not have performed as well as they could have in an interview,
Ah.
but have all the substance there,
Yeah.
but weren't noticed because of
Yeah.
the branding component.
You have to love psychometrics though,
Yeah.
because it's like,
That's what
because
it helps stop the bias.
yes,
Yeah.
and it's like, an introvert, and you're like, oh, this, I mean, there's gas in the tank with whoever this person is, and I've seen that, and that's great. Yeah, and it's like, okay.
It gives more people an equal chance of being able to perform than if it was just based off that interview.
Yeah, and there's ways that an introverted person can sell stuff,
Yeah.
and be a salesperson and that kind of thing. There are definite ways of making that happen. I think the important part is to not adopt an extrovert strategy.
Yes.
You have to come up, with your own little ways of achieving the same goal. Adopt that strategy on the other side.
Yeah.
It doesn't work for them.
No, but I think it's also like trying to be something you're not.
Right.
We had done a lot of psychometrics in a sales team, and they were selling cars, and we decided, if you're using psychometrics to select, do you want an introvert salesperson or do you want an extrovert salesperson? So they did a whole study, and they realized that introverts and extroverts have just as good as sales figures. They're just as good as meeting their targets, but the how is different. So an extrovert is more likely to stand up on a shop floor and approach a client, phone them on their birthday, do all those sorts of things that are more extroverty type relationship building strategies, whereas an introvert might be really strong at the paperwork, the detail, the focus, the logistics
And
around
also
it.
giving them space.
Yes, not being overwhelming.
Yeah. Like,
So both had
strategies.
strategies.
Sign
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I found that so interesting because at first glance you would assume, all salespeople should be extroverted because they have to deal with people all the time. But there are introverted salespeople who are very successful, but they've also got to be mindful of their energy because they can't be the salesperson that is cold calling all day because that is tiring for an introvert. So an introvert needs to manage their time in a way that works well for them, like you said, rather than trying to be the extrovert in order to do well in their work.
Yeah, look, I mean, an unpleasant combination is introverted and neurotic. Yeah, that's a tough one. Like extroverted and neurotic. Well, it's like.
You'll see it more.
You'll
know that.
You'll definitely see
Yeah.
it. But there's always it's an interesting thing. Like the notion of experiencing two opposite emotions at the same time. So you can be experiencing like anxiety and negative mood affect, and still feel positive and be excited at something at the same time. Like that's a confusing little thing to kind of sort out. It's hard enough trying to process one emotion at a time. And you get this little little milkshake that's made up just for you. Yeah, there is that sense. Yeah, and a lot of how that's kind of perceived. I know in America, like with if the kids that are shy, because they're very verbose as a culture, and they literally, they've got like interventions camps that that they go out and they just force them, They push them through. They push them through on that.
And I think it's just style.
I know.
For me, it's. I always say when I'm giving feedback is that, when you're standing at the ice cream counter and you've got strawberry and vanilla and you've got all these flavors, that's for me what preference is. It's like, what flavor are we going to get? It's not about whether you can perform or your capability. It's more about when I'm engaging with you, am I going to experience one thing or am I going to experience another thing? And one is not necessarily better than the other. It's just about knowing, okay, well, you're chocolate and you're strawberry. So I don't think there's something that we have to force ourselves to be the other side. We have to be mindful of the gaps that come with being on one side, but there's not necessarily a better one. It's more just like how you're going to approach it.
It's like, so like, you're not, when we were growing up, we didn't actually have social media. Like really, nothing like with the kids. Well, it's like, the behavior of the general, whatever, our generation, Generation Z, or that sort of thing, it's like, well, it's like they are far more isolated and like voluntarily so. They keep themselves in their rooms, and they'll play like a social game on their phones or whatever it is. But there's very little like outdoors thing, and I'm like, well, and I'm like, well, how do extroverted kids kind of cope with that? Because this whole thing is so utterly pervasive. Here's another little interesting thing: is they are having less sex than any other generation before them. I'm like, that's so strange, That was like the thing that was like a priori, It's like, is finding a potential attractive boy, trying to win them, schmooze them over, and like perform in front of them, like, oh, look at me, kind of thing, like I'm the one you want, like that kind of thing. So I don't even know how that plays out, how that gets sort of expressed on through the internet of things, and I don't know. But the isolating part is a different problem. So in one sense, like with social media, it's like there's an over-connectedness that kind of happens, and it's
at
like,
the same time with being underconnected.
Yeah, and I think there are so many connections, but their worth, the actual worth is far less. Is far less, and there's that kind of cutting off from actual one-on-one sort of connection. And the other thing, like, while introverts were like, yay, like that sort of thing, fast forward within 6 months, that also has its limits. And then I remember like the kind of conversation with them where it's like, now they are just utterly frazzled, because it's like, and I remember having these conversations there because it's like, and that acknowledgement, I'm like, oh, I actually need I need that connection, and I need that contact with other people. So they also had some profound moments, in a very extreme situation, on that front, and then it was, the resilient people did well for a bit, but even they peaked it out in the end. I think everybody hit.
Everybody?
Everybody hits it. Extroverted, introverted, or not.
Yeah.
The working from home thing, I'm not a big fan of it. Well, I'm not. I work from my office. I need and that separation where I go to work and that kind of thing.
But I like with the introversion and extroversion, it's easy for people to understand and to spot in themselves. And it's also a nice entry point for people to start being mindful of their energy. How do I feel when I'm doing this? How do I feel when I'm doing that? And how do I structure my day and structure the way I work according to where my energy flows? So if you're an extrovert, you might find you enjoy bursts of people throughout your day, whereas if you're introverted, you might find bursts of recovery after being with people. And that if you can start being mindful of your energy, you can start to structure your day so you can enhance your energy.
When you say being mindful of your energy, like I'm immediately like in my mind, like it's like boundaries. It's inevitably with introverts and extroverts, it's always a question on boundaries. And if you've got like if the boundaries are well sorted out and well dialed, then you get this well-oiled machine, and you can kind of take benefit of somebody who's psychometrically diverse to you. And I think that is where the magic happens.
For sure.
Sure. I don't even know how long we spoke for, but it's
but it feels good.
kind of covered that. Okay, so yeah, there's excitement seeking, the positive affect. There's an ascendancy in the portion to that. There is, what else is there? That's kind of it. Like the sort of adventure aspect. So extremely high extrovert, take a lot of risk. Too high in excitement seeking. That's it. Which can easily be confused for positivity, and if you can just think that you can do it, like you're going to make that robot and stuff like that changes color, think again, okay. Right, I think that's it. Thanks, Jill. Okay, so we've covered that. We've got one left over, which is openness to experience, which is creativity in essence, and then we'll go into the combinations. All right, guys. Thanks a lot. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.